Thanks, Dr. Vallance, for giving time to CNBC TV18. And yeah, it's nice to have you. Just to start off, what are your initial thoughts about the Indian R&D scenario? How do you think GSK is working on the India side of its global R&D footprint?
Well, so we've had quite a long presence in India. We've got collaborations with a number of companies here, and we've got our own R&D activity here in Bangalore and some people in Mumbai, but we've got a very strong relationship with TCS, nearly 800 people there working for GSK, and also with GVK Bio, we've got about 250 chemists and biologists working. And I have to say, I'm very, very impressed with the way things have moved, actually. I mean, they're deeply professional, cutting-edge organizations. And what I'm particularly impressed by is the skill sets in India. As mathematical approaches to biology and chemistry and data become so important in our business, that seems to me to be an area where India is going to make a very big impact.
Sure. You also have a vaccines collaboration with a Hyderabad company here, Biological E. That was done about 2 or 3 years ago, and if you can give us some update about that.
Yeah, I'm not the best person to give the update on the vaccines, but I mean, I know that that's going well. I know there are plans to look at further collaborations on that. And of course, vaccines in India is a major thing for us. We'd like to be much more involved in the government programs, try and think about how to get vaccines out to people.
Right. So in terms of collaborations, when you mentioned about collaborations, do you see opportunities among the Indian drug companies? We've seen some of the real large ones going out and doing a lot on drug discovery now, and even in licensing products. I mean, for example, Sun Pharma did a deal with Merck for tildrakizumab, which is an anti-psoriasis drug in phase 3 right now. Glenmark is doing a lot of work in biologics. We have such big names. Zydus Cadila is also working a lot. Any of these companies, do they kind of provide opportunities for you to look at?
Yes,
closely?
I mean, definitely. So we spend a lot of time scouting, looking for who's got what. We're very much of the belief that a very small fraction of the world's scientists work inside GSK. And therefore it's highly unlikely we'll invent everything, and we must be looking outside the whole time. And increasingly we're looking in India, and as I said, there's some really outstanding scientists and a really, I think, very, very strong progression of the science base applied to drug discovery here, and as you've just said, an emergent, innovative R&D approach to new medicines, and it's an area that we need to keep an eye on.
Right. Will you kind of do some kind of base here to see if, because there was a time when collaborations were happening really at a very fast clip. Do you want to deploy people here to look at potential deals or opportunities?
Well, so we've got a group in Mumbai, we've got a group in Bangalore, and one of the things that I'm going to go back from this trip is thinking, how good are we at actually scouting and connectivity? Because I think we do need to be better at our connectivity, both in terms, as you say, of the emerging companies, but also what's happening in the academic institutes and the strong science base here, just to make sure that we've got our right connections.
Right. So when we talk about opportunities, we can actually add some more perspective about the challenges also. So when you talk about India, what challenges do you see when it comes to kind of spurring innovation?
Well, I think the jump from more of a contract-based relationship and a jump from generics to innovative is not a trivial change. I mean, it's a massively different risk profile, and I think there will be failures. So one of the cultural things which I think is incredibly important to get the sort of ecosystem of innovation right is to be very accepting of failure, because most things don't work in drug discovery. Most companies end up spending money and failing. But then some make it, and I think that acceptance of failure, which I think is where the US spirit has been so successful, I think is one of the things that's going to be a challenge, and is often a challenge in countries to get that right.
Sure. Right. Moving on to some of the global environment that's coming up now, we've seen the emergence of a lot of new companies like Gilead or Celgene becoming big, and then some of the biggest blockbusters happening. Do you think larger established players may have lost out in the race to innovate those real blockbusters? Where do you think probably the opportunities were missed, and what more can be done?
Right, so it's a great question, and of course, one of the interesting things is going to be, as those companies become more like the big companies, what challenges they'll face. Because one of the problems, of course, of a big company is it's very difficult to turn the needle with one molecule. And so it's not actually true, if you look at it, that the big companies have missed out on some of the blockbusters. And we've had our own, which have, for example, dolutegravir for HIV. We think mepolizumab coming along for COPD. But individual medicines are unlikely to completely transform the company in the way that, of course, they will for a Celgene, or have done in the past for a Celgene or a Gilead. But I don't think there's been a big missing of opportunities.
Right. In fact, for GSK, it's been a good run with its new products really contributing quite significantly in the last few quarters.
Yes, I mean, our new products that we've launched recently, in Q3, we're making up over 25% of sales. So that's a pretty impressive replacement record. It's one that we need to continue and to build on. And some of those had a slowish start. I think that's what's interesting, that the new medicines actually are not getting off to such a fast start, some of them, but they continue to grow. And we've seen that in our respiratory franchise, in HIV, and we've got things coming along which we're pretty excited about in immunoinflammation and oncology.
Right. So, of all your new kids on the block, sir, Brio, Nucala, and some of your oncology products, which ones do you think are the real star products which can fill up somewhat the gap of Advair?
Yeah, so I think in the respiratory space, we always said that it was our total respiratory pipeline that would replace the Advair and continue to grow. And I think what we've done is really rounded off the inhaled portfolio, all in one device, one puff once a day. And as we move to triple therapy, which is now under regulatory consideration, that would really round out that portfolio, and I think that's a growing portfolio. But mepolizumab's the one I'd pick from there as something that really does make a very substantial difference to severe asthmatics. And obviously on the HIV side, dolutegravir has been a hugely important medicine for us.
Yes, I think you've really struck off most of the other existing products, darunavir, Efavirenzalta, raltegravir. It's like proven superior to all of these existing products, right?
Well, I think we've had a very good clinical development program where we've done the head-to-head comparisons. We've shown the activity of dolutegravir. I think it's a very good drug.
Right. When you talk about R&D, sir, I mean, it's like we know the $2.6 billion and 15 years, all the numbers are out. What can be done to really speed up? Because the approvals, Donald Trump has been talking about the kind of time lag that it takes for the drug to be approved, and even going to the extent of saying that we should just approve drugs on the basis of safety. Any comments on that?
Well, I'm absolutely clear that I think the FDA actually has done a lot in the last few years. We really strongly support a science-based regulatory organisation that takes things very seriously in terms of their assessment. The FDA actually has done a lot to try and improve things, breakthrough designation, fast-tracking things. So I think there's a lot that's happened. I'm sure there's more that can be done, as always, but we're supporters of that system. And in terms of what can be done in the industry, I think we're in a wave of a very different era where human biology is really being unravelled in a way that makes starting points for drugs much better. So I think genetics in particular is going to reveal a whole host of targets, which is going to mean that there's a more certainty at the beginning. And I think at the clinical end, we've got to get smarter clinical trials, digital, wearable devices, in-stream measurements. Those two things together, I think, give a real opportunity to shorten the time, increase the productivity.
So you will tend to think that the journey ahead is going to be more on biologics than the small molecules?
No, I don't actually. I think biologics clearly are a very important part. They're a major part of where the blockbusters have come from. But I think small molecules. People maybe 5 or 6 years ago were predicting the exit of small molecules. I don't see that at all. I think they're an important part of the armamentarium. And I think we've now really got 3 modalities to think about: small molecules, biopharmaceuticals, and of course cell and gene therapies, which are now coming up as well.
Absolutely. So you are a supporter of CAR-Ts or any checkpoint inhibitors?
I'm a supporter of genetically manipulated cells as therapies, and we had our first approval last year for a very rare disease, ADA SCID, immunodeficiency in children. But the important thing actually is that treatment, I think the longest treated child is now 12 years out following a single treatment. And that's really the power of these things, that you've potentially got a single intervention with a very long-lasting effect.
Sure. And you will pump in more investments?
Yes, we're investing in those sorts of gene replacement. We're investing in cancer with modified T-cell receptor therapies and in CAR-T. So we see that field as one that's got the potential to grow. How big it'll be, how widely applicable, we don't know yet. But of course, that's exactly the situation that people were in with antibody treatments 25 years ago.
Sure. So Viti has been a big supporter of pricing, for markets according to the per capita income, and not a broad brush strategy. With value-based pricing, things like pay for performance coming into play, we are seeing Novartis doing that for Entresto, the heart failure drug, and even Novo Nordisk working on that. Do you think that's the future that you can actually roll out for all the markets, or do you think it will be specific to reimbursed markets?
Well, so we're definitely of the view that access is crucial. You can't be a major healthcare company and then say, well, actually, I'm going to ignore most of the population. So we're committed to making sure pricing is appropriate. We absolutely believe that volume is key when you've got reduced pricing, to make sure you get the access to the right population and patients get access. And I think there will be a series of approaches, value-based pricing. I think if you take the example of the cell and gene therapy that I talked about, which is obviously expensive, one of the questions for healthcare systems is, do you pay for that all in one go, or do you pay for that over years? And then, if it stops working, you stop paying. And I think those are questions which everyone's going to have to face, particularly actually as we get into an era where cures or single interventions look like they're becoming possible.
Sure. So in the recent past, we've seen some real scary situations emerging out of the Zika scare, and then Ebola was even more dangerous. And then there was a resolution in World Economic Forum that we should do. There was a forum formed, CEPI, which kind of was a grouping of companies working on this. What are your thoughts on that? Do you need to prepare well in advance so that we can actually avoid those kind of situations?
Well, we definitely need to be quicker. If you look at the Ebola situation, several of us were quite fast out of the blocks, but by the time we got there, the epidemic had largely passed, and it's very difficult to show the effect of the drug. So we definitely need to be quicker. I think it's incredibly difficult to predict. Many of us have been in many meetings over the past few years with everyone trying to work out what the next 20 major threats are. Probably we didn't get the right one, because that's the point. So you need a system that's able to respond quickly, and where you have multiple players knowing what their role in the response is. And I think that's one of the key things, is to not have everybody doing the same thing, but to have a more sort of plug and play, join it together. And I think that's where CEPI is important, and it's where what we've put together as the biopreparedness organisation in Rockville becomes important, with a big vaccines opportunity there.
Right. So GSK, again, this is a fascinating subject on pricing. GSK has actually priced its most innovative products almost at the similar level of its older products, and that's been a big, Sir Viti has been very proud about that. Do you think that kind of a situation will continue, or do you think you will need to probably break that barrier, and sometimes the pricing may be higher?
Well, I think, pricing is obviously going to vary depending on products, but I think the principle is we need to work with healthcare systems, not against them. And everyone can see what the challenges are on healthcare systems, and everyone can see that whilst new medicines bring very substantial value value. That value needs to be recognised in the healthcare system. It can't be separate from that. And so, on occasions, our new products will be priced at the same level as existing products, and on occasions there'll be times when actually there's such significant added value that they ought to be priced differently. But at all times they need to be priced in a way that healthcare systems can actually access and use them. Otherwise, and this is a quote from somebody else, innovation isn't innovation if you can't afford it.
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of your drug discovery unit, that itself has kind of shrunk quite a lot in the last 8-9 years. I mean, in terms of productivity increased, and then you just shrunk to 2 discovery centers, right? So, do you think this is the optimal level, or do you think there is a scope to expand further?
Well, what we've really done, I mean, we have decreased, as everybody has, and our efficiency has increased as the opportunity increased. But I think the reason we went to 2 centres was really about laboratory science, where if you have 30 centres with equipment spread all over the place and people spread all over the place, you lose 2 things. You lose the opportunity to invest in cutting edge equipment, which you absolutely need for the science we do, and you lose the chance to have the interaction between people across disciplines that's so important. So we've created sort of critical mass in 2 places. It doesn't mean we won't have some other activities elsewhere, but that's where our laboratory science base is really going to be concentrated.
One concluding question, sir. Digital marketing is something that has been pioneered by GSK, and then, of not really paying doctors for their presentations and all. And before that, drug performance units and all, we have already seen a lot of new work happening in GSK. Going into the future, sir, do you think there will be something as disruptive as this when you talk about R&D? Do you think it can be done out of something very different, which Google or Apple may be doing right now?
Well, so I think data, I mean, by inference, your question goes there, but I think data is the big thing. And so we've got the Chief Data Officer who's really pushing our data strategy. We're looking very hard about the partnerships we want. We announced just a couple of weeks ago a relationship with the Lawrence Livermore laboratories in the US using super high powered computing to try and deal with some of the data problems that we throw up and the data opportunities. So I think data is the big revolution. But that's a glib statement. You need to really say, well, what does that mean? And I think that's now being worked out. What it does mean is the number of mathematically understanding individuals in science, mathematical biologists, computational chemists, coding biologists, whatever it might be, is going to increase. We need a workforce that actually is trained in the use of the new data paradigms, which are going to be so important.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your time, sir. That was great to talk to you.